Henry walked through his wheat field on a warm afternoon, just like he had done every day for the past 40 years. At 68, farming was more than just work. It was his life. As the sun began to set, he noticed someone standing between the rows of wheat. A woman in a simple dress, her hair grey like his own. He squinted, thinking his eyes were playing tricks. But as he got closer, his hands began to shake. He knew that face. He would know it anywhere. It was Margaret, his first love from back in high school, the girl who left town in 1973 and never came back. He hadn't seen her in 45 years, but his heart remembered. Neither of them moved at first. The wheat swayed between them, golden stalks catching the last rays of sunlight. Margaret's hands fidgeted with the hem of her dress, a nervous habit she hadn't lost in 45 years. "I wasn't sure you'd recognize me," she said finally, her voice carrying the same soft lilt he remembered from their youth. Henry's throat felt dry. "You haven't changed that much." A lie, but a kind one. They had both changed. Time had silvered their hair and softened their edges, yet something in her eyes remained exactly as he remembered. "I'm here about Mum's estate," she explained, glancing toward town. "She passed last month." Henry nodded slowly. Eleanor Williams had been a formidable woman, one who'd never approved of her daughter's relationship with a farmer's son. "I'm sorry for your loss." Margaret's laugh held a touch of bitterness. "Are you?" The question hung between them, heavy with decades of unspoken words. Henry found himself reaching into his pocket, touching the worn leather of his wallet, where he still kept their only photo together. Their senior yearbook picture tucked away like a pressed flower between credit cards and grocery receipts. "Would you like some coffee?" he asked instead of answering. "Mason's diner is still open. Sarah runs it now. Mason's granddaughter, Sarah." Margaret's eyes softened. "I remember when she was born. Mason was so proud." He was. Henry gestured toward his truck, parked at the edge of the field. "It's about that time anyway. I always stop for coffee before heading home." The walk to his truck was silent, broken only by the crunch of their feet on dry earth. Henry helped her up into the passenger seat, a gesture that felt both foreign and familiar. Her hand was warm against his, and for a moment he was 17 again, helping her into his father's borrowed pickup. As he walked around to the driver's side, memories flooded back unbidden. Summer evenings spent parking at Miller's Point, watching the sun set over these same fields. The way she'd lean her head on his shoulder as they planned their future. The morning she didn't show up at their meeting spot behind the school, leaving nothing but rumors and whispers in her wake. "I got married," she said suddenly as he started. "The engine. He passed 3 years ago. Cancer." Henry nodded, keeping his eyes on the dirt road ahead. "Alice passed 5 years ago. Heart attack." "I know," Margaret said softly. "Mum told me." Of course she had. Eleanor Williams had kept tabs on everyone in town, even after Margaret left, especially after Margaret left. The truck bounced along the familiar route into town, kicking up dust in the rearview mirror. The silence between them was filled with the ghosts of conversations they should have had decades ago. "I wrote to you," Margaret said as the first buildings of town came into view. "After I left." Henry's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I never got any letter." "I'm starting to understand that now." Her voice was heavy with realization. "Mom told me a lot of things on her deathbed. Things I should have questioned years ago." The truck pulled into Mason's diner's parking lot, gravel crunching under the tires. The neon open sign buzzed in the growing dusk, casting a red glow across their faces. Henry turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. "Why did you come to the field today?" he asked, finally looking at her directly. Margaret's eyes met his, and for a moment he saw the girl who had promised to love him forever. "Because that's where all our best memories were made, and because—" She paused, drawing a shaky breath. "Because I needed to know if those memories were real or if I'd just romanticized them all these years." Henry's heart ached with a pain he thought he'd buried long ago. And a small smile touched her lips. They were real, every one of them. Mason's diner looked exactly as Margaret remembered, down to the chrome trim and red vinyl booths. Only the waitress, young, with Sarah's warm smile, reminded her that time hadn't actually stood still. "Your usual, Mr. Mitchell?" the waitress asked as they settled into a corner booth. "Thanks, Jenny," and Henry looked at Margaret. "Coffee black," Margaret said. "And do you still make Eleanor's raspberry pie?" Jenny's eyes widened slightly. "You mean Mrs. Williams' recipe?" "We sure do. Mum, Sarah, says it's been on the menu since before she was born." "2 slices," Henry added, watching the recognition dawn on Jenny's face as she looked between and them. After she left, Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a battered tin recipe box. "Speaking of Mom's recipes, I found this while cleaning out her house. Look inside." Henry opened the box carefully. Between yellowed recipe cards, he found dozens of folded notes. Their notes, passed in high school hallways, saved in secret. "By Eleanor Williams, of all people. Meet me by the oak tree after practice," he read from one, his voice rough. "Wear your letter jacket. I like how warm it is. I remember this. You were always cold." "Still am." Margaret wrapped her hands around her coffee cup as Jenny delivered it. "Mom kept everything, even the letters I never sent." Henry set down the recipe box. "Why didn't you send them?" "Some I did, or thought I did. Others." She pulled out a stack of envelopes, addresses faded but readable, all addressed to him, all unopened. Mom had them in a separate box, along with this. She slid a newspaper clipping across the table. The headline read, "Local farm faces foreclosure. Mitchell property at risk." Dated September 1973. Just weeks after she'd left. "I never knew," she said softly. "Mom told me your family was selling the farm to send you to college. That you were moving away. That you'd—" She swallowed hard. "That you'd said it was better if I didn't write." Henry stared at the clipping. He remembered that fall. The bank threatening foreclosure, his father's desperate scramble to save the farm, the long hours of extra work. But they'd made it through. They hadn't lost anything, except Margaret. "We refinanced," he said. "Dad took a second job. I stayed to help instead of going to State University. By Christmas, we were stable again. Mom said you'd left for college. That's why she didn't—" Margaret's voice caught. "Why she didn't need to pass along my letters." The pie arrived, 2 perfect slices of Eleanor's famous raspberry recipe. Neither touched them. "Did you ever wonder," Henry asked, "why I never came looking for you?" "Mom said you did once. Said you came by angry, demanding to see me. Said you were drunk, threatening. That's why she had to send me to Aunt Clara's." Henry's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. Margaret, I never came to your house, not once. Your mother told my parents you'd left a note breaking. The thing's off, that you needed a fresh start away from—" He gestured vaguely. "All this." A tear slid down Margaret's cheek. "She told me you'd chosen the farm over me. That you'd said a farmer's wife wasn't the future you wanted anymore." The diner's bell chimed as the door opened. They both looked up to see Sarah, Mason's Sarah, stop dead in her tracks, staring at them. She recovered quickly, moving behind the counter to speak with Jenny, but her eyes kept darting their way. "News will be all over town by morning," Henry said. "Let it." Margaret pulled out another piece of paper from the recipe box. "I found this too, Mum's confession, written the day before she died." Henry read it silently, his face growing darker. With each line, Eleanor's spidery handwriting spelled out decades of manipulation, intercepted letters, manufactured lies, carefully crafted deceptions designed to keep them apart. "She thought she was protecting me," Margaret said. "From the hard life of a farmer's wife. From watching the man I loved lose everything to bank debt. From—" She closed her eyes. "From the pregnancy scare that wasn't even real." Henry's head snapped up. "What?" "I was late. Just stressed from finals. But Mom, she used that. Told me you'd be forced to marry me, give up college, lose the farm. Said it would destroy both our lives." Margaret's laugh was bitter. "By the time I knew for sure I wasn't pregnant, she had me halfway to Aunt Clara's in Chicago." The diner had grown quiet, other patrons obviously straining to hear their conversation. Sarah approached their table, coffee pot in hand. "Refills?" she asked, her voice gentle. "On the house, seems like you two might need them." Henry managed a smile. "Thanks, Sarah. Your daddy would have done the same." "He told me about you two, you know," Sarah said, filling their cups. "Used. To say you were the town's own Romeo and Juliet, minus the dying part. Said it was a shame how things turned out." Margaret wiped her eyes. "Mason was always kind to us. Still is, in a way." Sarah gestured to the pie. "Mom and I kept his diner going, kept Mrs. Williams' recipe on the menu. Some things shouldn't be lost to time." After Sarah left, they sat in silence, picking at the pie that tasted exactly as it had in high school. "I have to ask," Henry said finally, "why now? Why come to the field today?" Margaret touched the recipe box gently. "Because Mom's last words to me were, 'The letters are in my recipe box.' She wanted me to know. Maybe that was her way of making amends." 45 years late," Henry said, but there was more sadness than bitterness in his voice. "Better late than never?" Margaret offered. Then, more softly, "I've missed you, Henry, every day since I left." Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. His daughter's name flashed on the screen. Time, it seemed, wasn't done interfering with them just yet. Henry stared at his phone, letting it ring. Margaret watched his expression shift from uncertainty to resignation. "Your daughter?" she asked. "Lisa," he sighed. Someone must have called her already. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately buzzed with a text message. "Dad, call me ASAP, important." "You should call her back," Margaret said, reaching for her purse. "I should go anyway. It's getting late." "Wait." Henry's hand moved instinctively to stop her, hovering over hers without. "Quite touching. There's one letter here we haven't read yet." He pointed to a sealed envelope in the recipe box, the paper yellow with age. Unlike the others, this one was addressed to Margaret in his handwriting. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. "I never got this one either. I wrote it the week after you left. Drove to your house every day for a week, trying to deliver it in person. Your mother always said you weren't home." Margaret traced her finger over the sealed edge. "Because I was already in Chicago." "Read it," Henry said softly. "We've waited 45 years. Might as well know everything now." She opened the envelope carefully, trying not to tear the fragile paper. His teenage handwriting sprawled across the page, urgent and earnest. "Dear Margaret, they say you left a note breaking things off, but I don't believe it. Not after everything we planned. Not after the promise we made under the oak tree. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it together. The farm troubles aren't as bad as people are saying. Dad has a plan. I have savings from working at the garage. We can make it work. If you're scared about the future, I understand. But I'm scared too. Scared of losing you. Meet me at our spot in the wheat field. Any day, any time. I'll wait every sunset for the rest of the summer if I have to. I love you. That hasn't changed. It won't change." "Henry," Margaret pressed, her hand to her mouth, tears falling freely now. "You waited every sunset, all summer." Henry's voice was rough. "Eventually, winter came. The farm needed attention. Life," he gestured vaguely, "life went on." His phone buzzed again. Lisa's name flashed insistently. "You need to talk to her," Margaret said, wiping her eyes. "She's worried about you. She thinks you're after my farm." The words came out more bluntly than he intended. "Sorry, that's not—" "No, you're right." Margaret's smile was sad. "That's exactly what she's thinking. What my son will probably think when he hears about this too." "You have a son?" "James. He's a lawyer in Chicago." She pulled out her own phone, showing him a photo of a serious-looking man in his 40s. "Named him after my father. He's protective." Henry nodded slowly. "Lisa's the same way, especially since Alice passed." The diner had emptied out, leaving them alone with their cooling coffee and half-eaten pie. Sarah was wiping down distant tables, carefully giving them space while staying within earshot. "We were just kids," Margaret said suddenly, "making promises we couldn't possibly understand. We understood enough. Henry's voice was firm. Your mother was wrong about me, about us. I would have made you happy. You don't know that. I do. He pulled out his wallet again, removing the yearbook photo. Because every good thing that happened in my life, marrying Alice, raising Lisa, saving the farm, all of it started with learning how to love someone completely. You taught me that? Margaret touched the photo gently. You kept this all these years? Some things you don't let go of, even when you should. His phone buzzed a third time. A text from Lisa. Dad, I'm coming over. I should go, Margaret said, reading the message upside down. Give you time with your daughter, and I need to call James before he hears about this. From someone else. Have dinner with us tomorrow, Henry said impulsively. Both of you. James can meet Lisa. We can explain everything together. Margaret hesitated. Henry, please. He touched her hand finally, the first deliberate contact since helping her into his truck. We lost 45 years to other people's fears. Let's not lose more time to our children's. After a long moment, she nodded. I'll call James tonight. But Henry, she squeezed his hand. No more secrets, no more undelivered letters. Whatever happens next, we face it honestly, together, he added, and was rewarded with her first genuine smile of the evening. Sarah appeared with their check, which Henry insisted on paying. As they stood to leave, she handed Margaret a piece of pie wrapped to go. Mom always says, Sarah said with a knowing smile, some things taste better the second time around. Lisa Mitchell's car was already parked in front of Henry's farmhouse when he pulled up. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, looking remarkably like her mother when something had upset her. The family photo album was tucked under her arm, the one Henry kept in the living room bookshelf. I'll call you about tomorrow, Margaret said softly, as Henry parked. She'd insisted he'd drop her at the old Williams place, where she was staying while settling the estate. Lisa's not going to let this go easily, he warned. Neither will James. Margaret gathered her purse and the recipe box. But they're going to have to learn that we're not teenagers anymore. We can make our own decisions. As Margaret walked toward her mother's house, Lisa descended the porch steps, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. Dad, she started. What are you doing? Henry took his time getting out of the truck, having coffee with an old friend. An old friend? Lisa held up the photo album. You mean the girl from all these old pictures? The one Mom said was your first love? That stopped him. Alice told you about Margaret? Of course she did. Lisa's voice softened. She said everyone has a first love, and she was grateful yours taught you how to love so well. Henry had to turn away, overcome for a moment. Alice had never shown jealousy over his past with Margaret, had even encouraged him to talk about it sometimes. Your mother was a wise woman. She also said first loves belong in the past. Lisa followed him onto the porch. Dad, you're 68 years old. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that life sometimes gives you second chances. He unlocked the door, leading them into the familiar comfort of his living room. And I'm thinking you're old enough to understand that. Lisa set the photo album on the coffee table, opening it to a page she'd clearly been studying. There was Margaret at 17, sitting on the hood of Henry's father's truck, her hair catching the summer sun. And there was Henry, looking at her like she held all the answers to life's mysteries. You loved her, Lisa said. It wasn't a question. I did. Henry sat in his favorite armchair, watching his daughter process this. And then she left, and I loved your mother. Both things are true. And now? Now I'm having dinner with her and her son tomorrow night. You're invited. Her son? Lisa's eyebrows shot up. She has family? A son in Chicago. A lawyer. Henry couldn't help smiling at Lisa's expression. Probably just as worried about his mother as you are about your father. I'm not worried, Lisa protested automatically. Then, okay, I am worried. Dad, people are already talking. Mrs. Henderson called to tell me she saw you two at Mason's, said you were holding hands. Since when do you listen to Mrs. Henderson's gossip? Since my recently widowed father starts reliving his teenage romance, the words hung in the air between them. Henry leaned forward, taking Lisa's hands in his. Honey, I'm not reliving anything. I'm discovering that the story I thought I knew wasn't the whole truth. Margaret's mother kept us apart with lies and manipulation. We both went on to live good lives, love good people, raise wonderful children. But now what? Now we have a chance to understand what really happened, to maybe build something new. He squeezed her hands. I'm not trying to replace your mother. No one could ever do that. Lisa's phone chimed. A text message. That made her frown. That's Margaret's son, she said. James Williams. He found me on Facebook. Henry waited, watching his daughter read the message. He wants to meet for coffee before dinner tomorrow. Lisa looked up. To discuss our parents' situation, as he puts it. And I told him yes. She closed the photo album carefully. Because he's right. We should talk before this goes any further. Henry felt a flash of worry, remembering how Eleanor's interference had shaped his and Margaret's past. Lisa, Dad, I'm not going to scheme to keep you apart. She managed a small smile. But I am going to make sure this James understands that if his mother hurts you, he'll have me to deal with. Margaret's not Eleanor, Henry said quietly. No, but she's still the woman who broke your heart once. Lisa stood, gathering her things. Even if it wasn't entirely her fault. At the door, she paused. Bring her to Sunday dinner next week. If this is really something you want to pursue, the kids should meet her. Henry felt his throat tighten. His grandchildren had been his salvation after Alice passed. You mean that? I mean, I'm trying to understand. Lisa hugged him quickly. Just be careful with your heart, Dad. It's the only one we've got. After she left, Henry sat in his quiet house, surrounded by photographs of the life he'd built after Margaret. Alice beamed from their wedding picture, held their newborn daughter, laughed at family picnics. He touched her image gently. You knew, didn't you? He whispered. That's why you told Lisa about her. You knew someday I might need everyone to understand. The photo seemed to smile back, keeping its secrets. Outside, the wheat field whispered in the evening breeze, holding memories of two teenagers who had once thought love was simple. Morning arrived with the same reliability it had shown for the past 40 years of farming. Henry was up before dawn, going through his usual routine when his phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. James agreed to dinner. He's meeting Lisa for coffee at 2. Can I see the farm before then? Henry's weathered John Deere tractor sat ready in the barn, freshly cleaned from yesterday's work. He'd always maintained it meticulously, just as his father had taught him. This machine had seen him through decades of harvests, droughts, and prosperity. It's not the same one, he told Margaret an hour later as she ran her hand along the tractor's green paint. But it's the same model Dad bought when we saved the farm. Couldn't bear to upgrade to those computerized ones. It suits you, she said, and he could hear the memory in her voice of the teenage boy who'd once talked endlessly about farming innovations while she pretended to understand. Want to see the rest? She nodded, and he helped her climb up into the passenger seat, muscle memory from 45 years ago making his heart skip. The tractor rumbled to life, its familiar diesel purr a comfort as they set out across the morning cool fields. We've expanded, he explained, gesturing to the distant tree line. Added the Peterson place when they retired in 85, then the western section in 92. He paused. Alice's father helped with that purchase, believed in the farm as much as Dad did. Margaret listened intently, noting how his voice changed when speaking of Alice, warm with love and loss. She sounds wonderful. She was. Henry guided the tractor along the field's edge. She knew about you, you know. I told her everything when we started dating. Everything. About first love. About learning what it means to give your heart completely. He kept his eyes on the path ahead. She said that's how she knew I'd love her well, because I'd learned how precious love is when I lost you. They rode in silence for a while, the morning sun warming their shoulders. The wheat fields stretched out around them, golden waves dancing in the breeze. "What about your husband?" Henry asked finally. "Robert." Margaret smiled sadly. "He was kind, steady, never asked why I sometimes looked at wheat fields with tears in my eyes." She touched the tractor's dash. "He was an accountant, couldn't tell a combine from a cultivator. But you loved him." "I did. Differently than—" She let the words trail off. "But deeply, truly. He gave me James. A good life. I was happy." They reached the old oak tree where they'd once carved their initials. Henry stopped the tractor. "It's still here," Margaret said, surprised. "Almost lost it in the storm of '89. Spent 3 days propping it up, running cables to support it." He patted the tractor's steering wheel. "This old girl helped pull it straight again." Margaret studied his profile. "You don't like letting go of things, do you?" "Only when I have to." He met her eyes. "Some things are worth fighting for." The morning had grown warmer. In the distance, a flock of birds rose from the wheat field, their wings catching the sunlight. "Show me more," Margaret said softly. They spent the next hour touring the farm. Henry pointed out the new irrigation system, the expanded grain storage, the solar panels that helped power the operation. Margaret asked thoughtful questions, remembering more about farming than he'd expected. "I subscribe to farming magazines," she admitted when he commented on it. "All these years. Told Robert it was because I liked the lifestyle articles. But really, I wanted to understand what your life might have been like." She looked out over the fields. If things had been different. They ended up back at the barn, where Henry had restored his father's old workbench. Tools hung in neat rows, many of them the same ones that had saved the farm in '73. "Dad died believing the farm was his greatest legacy," Henry said, running his hand along the worn wood of the bench. "Never knew that his real legacy was teaching me not to give up on. What matters? And what matters now, Henry?" The question hung between them, as heavy as the summer air. Before he could answer, both their phones chimed, messages from their children about the impending coffee meeting. "Truth," he said finally. "Whatever else happens, we owe them the truth. All of it." Margaret nodded, understanding. They had both built lives in the wake of their separation, good lives, filled with love and family. Whatever happened next couldn't erase or diminish those years. "The farm is beautiful," she said as he walked her to her car. "You've built something remarkable here." "We all build something," he replied. "Sometimes it's a farm, sometimes it's a family, sometimes—" He took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Sometimes it's a second chance." She squeezed back, then let go. They both had preparations to make before dinner. Their children would have questions, concerns, maybe even objections. But standing there in the morning sun, beside the tractor that had seen him through so many seasons, Henry felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the certainty that everything was exactly as it should be. The corner cafe buzzed with whispered conversations and furtive glances as Lisa Mitchell walked in to meet James Williams. She recognized him immediately. He had his mother's eyes and carried himself with the same careful dignity she remembered. "From Eleanor Williams." "Lisa Mitchell." He stood, offering his hand. "James Williams, thank you for meeting me." They settled into a corner table, away from curious onlookers. The local newspaper from 1973 lay between them, the one announcing, "Margaret's engagement to Robert Williams, no relation." James had brought it as evidence, though of what Lisa wasn't sure. "My mother never mentioned your father," James began, "until last month when grandmother died. Then she couldn't stop talking about him." "Funny." Lisa stirred her coffee. "My Dad never stopped mentioning your mother, just little things over the years. The way she loved raspberry pie, how she could name every constellation." James frowned. "That doesn't worry you?" "What worries me is seeing my father vulnerable again. He only lost my mother 5 years ago." "My father's been gone 3 years," James countered. "Mum's still grieving. Are we here to protect them or stop them?" The question hung between them as Mary Beth, the cafe owner's wife, deliberately walked past their table for the 3rd time. "News travels fast in small towns," Lisa commented. "Too fast." James pulled out his phone, showing her a local Facebook group where their parents' reunion was already being discussed. They're calling it a late-life romance rekindled. Some are even planning to bring casseroles. Despite herself, Lisa laughed. That's Millbrook for you. Nothing happens without casseroles. This isn't funny, James insisted. They're acting like teenagers. Mom's talking about extending her stay here. She has a life in Chicago, grandchildren who expect her for Sunday dinners. And Dad has grandchildren here who adore him, Lisa replied, who count on him being at every baseball game and dance recital. You think I'm not concerned? A new text lit up both their phones simultaneously. Their parents, in a group chat. Dinner at Henry's, 6 p.m., bringing photo albums. Photo albums. James looked alarmed. Dad keeps everything. Lisa's voice softened. Including a picture of your mom in his wallet. 45 years and he never took it out. Mom has one too. Found it when we were packing grandmother's things. Dad on a tractor looking impossibly young. They sat in silence, understanding growing between them. I looked up your father's farm, James said finally. It's worth quite a bit. Really? Lisa's tone turned icy. We're going there? I have to consider all angles. I'm a lawyer, and I'm a high school principal. Want to compare salaries to determine who's taking advantage of whom? James had the grace to look embarrassed. I apologize. That was uncalled for. Yes, it was. Lisa pulled out her own phone, showing him a photo. This is Dad with my kids last Christmas. Look at his eyes. That's a man who knows exactly what matters in life, and it's not money. Mom's the same way, James admitted. Always said success isn't about what you have, but who you share it with. He paused. She shared everything with Dad, except stories about your father. Because they hurt too much to tell? Maybe. James studied the old newspaper again. Did you know your grandparents helped orchestrate their separation? Lisa's head snapped up. What? Grandmother's confession mentioned collaborating with the Mitchells. They all thought they were protecting their children from making a huge mistake. Dad never knew. Neither did Mom. James leaned back, running a hand through his hair. We're sitting here worried about protecting them, and their own parents already tried that. Look how well it worked out. Around them, the cafe continued. Its usual afternoon rhythm, but the whispers had grown louder. Mrs. Henderson was openly watching them from the counter. We could stop this, James said quietly. Create enough doubt, raise enough concerns, and be just like our grandparents. Lisa shook her head. They're not lovesick teenagers anymore. They're adults who've lived full lives, lost spouses they adored, raised children they're proud of. Maybe what? Maybe they deserve to discover if there's still something worth exploring. James checked his watch, an expensive piece that screamed successful Chicago lawyer. I have to head to the house, help Mom get ready for dinner. He stood, then hesitated. Your father, he's a good man. The best, Lisa said simply. And your mother? She taught me everything I know about love. James smiled slightly, including that sometimes it's worth taking a risk. They parted with a handshake that was warmer than their greeting. As Lisa walked to her car, her phone buzzed with texts from 3 different friends, all asking about the handsome stranger she'd been meeting with. Small towns, she muttered, but found herself smiling. At least she and James would have something to laugh about at dinner. Margaret arrived at Henry's farmhouse clutching her mother's diary, discovered just hours before in a box of old tax records. James followed with a bottle of wine that cost more than his mother wanted to think about. They found Henry in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on Alice's pot roast recipe. Mum's bringing dessert, Lisa called from the dining room, where she was setting the table with her grandmother's china. Sarah insisted on sending one of Mason's pies. The diary sat on the counter like a live wire while they went through the motions of dinner preparations. Margaret kept glancing at it, her hands shaking slightly as she helped Henry with the vegetables. I found it this afternoon, she explained quietly. I haven't read it all yet, but, Henry, there's so much we didn't know. Whatever it says, he replied, we face it together. The aroma of pot roast filled the house, mingling with fresh-baked rolls and memory. James opened the wine, his lawyer's demeanor softening as he watched his mother move comfortably in Henry's kitchen, as if she belonged there. "Did you cook together?" he asked suddenly. "Back then, every Sunday after church," Margaret answered, surprising herself with the clarity of the memory. "Your grandmother hated it, said I was practicing to be a farmer's wife." "You were," Henry said softly. Lisa appeared in the doorway. "Dad, the table's ready? Should we—" "Yes." Margaret picked up the diary. "It's time everyone knew the whole story." They settled around the table, the diary next to Eleanor's recipe box. 4 glasses of wine, 4 plates of pot roast, and 45 years of unspoken truths between them. "I'll start." Margaret opened the diary to a marked page. Mother's first entry about us, dated June 1973. "Margaret thinks she's in love with the Mitchell boy. She doesn't understand what that life would mean. Grace Mitchell called today. We agree something must be done." Henry's fork clattered against his plate. "Grace Mitchell, my mother." Margaret continued reading. "Henry's scholarship to state. University is his only chance at a better life. Grace says he'll give it up to stay here with Margaret. We can't let that happen." "I had a scholarship?" Henry's voice cracked. "I never knew." "Full ride." Margaret turned the page. "The bank. Situation is worse than we feared. John Mitchell confided in Richard that they might lose the farm. Perfect timing for our plan." Lisa reached for her father's hand. "Grandpa John was in on it too." "Everyone but us," Henry said bitterly. Margaret's fingers trembled on the pages. "Told Margaret about the pregnancy scare today. The poor girl is terrified, exactly as planned. Grace will make sure Henry thinks Margaret's leaving him for someone else. A clean break is best." James set down his wineglass hard. "They manipulated you both, deliberately. Richard suggests sending Margaret to Clara's in Chicago." Margaret read on. "There's a suitable young man there, Robert Williams, good family, stable future. Margaret will thank me someday." The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the old kitchen clock, the same one that had counted out the hours in 1973. "You know what hurts most?" Henry finally said. "Not that they lied, but that they didn't trust us enough to make our own choices. They thought they were protecting us." Margaret closed the diary. "Mother wrote that every day for 45 years. She wondered if she'd done the right thing." "And had she?" James asked. Margaret looked at Henry, then at their children. "We both had good lives, loved our spouses deeply, raised amazing children. But we lived someone else's version of our story." Henry finished. Lisa picked up her wineglass. "So what's your version?" Henry and Margaret exchanged glances, decades of unspoken words passing between them. "We're writing it now," Margaret said simply. James leaned forward. "Mom, what about Chicago? Your friends, your book club, the grandkids?" "Planes fly both ways," she replied, "and Millbrook has a pretty good book club, I hear." "You're thinking of staying?" Lisa's voice was carefully neutral. "I'm thinking," Margaret chose her words deliberately, "that I spent 45 years living the life other people chose for me. Maybe it's time to choose my own." Henry reached across the table, taking her hand. This time, neither of them worried about what their children would think. "The farm needs some work," he said casually. "Someone with an eye for beauty to help restore the old rose garden Alice started." "The Williams place needs work too," Margaret matched his tone. "Someone who knows about old houses to look at that creaky porch." Their children watched this exchange, understanding dawning in their eyes. "We're not asking permission," Henry said gently, "but we'd like your blessing." "To date?" James asked. "To see what might have been," Margaret corrected, "and what still could be." Lisa stood suddenly. "I'll get the pie. I think we could all use something sweet right now." In the momentary solitude of the kitchen, she found herself smiling. Through the door, she could hear James asking about the farm's history, her father's voice warming as he explained the challenges they'd overcome. Her mother would have liked this, she realized. Alice had always said love was meant to multiply, not divide. When she returned with the pie, Henry and Margaret were showing James the photo albums. while Margaret's diary lay closed and forgotten. The past had been revealed. Now it was time to write the future. "Sarah sent vanilla ice cream too," Lisa announced. She paused, grinning. "She says some things are better a la mode the second time around. Black, 2 sugars." She smiled. "Some things you don't forget." They stood in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and looking at their teenage declarations of love. The fence post had grown grey with age, but the carving remained, a testament to something that had refused to completely fade. "James is heading back to Chicago today," Margaret said finally. "He has court on Monday. Lisa's staying for breakfast, says she needs to supervise us." Margaret laughed softly. "They're good kids, protective. They come by it honestly." Henry touched the carved initials again. "We were protective too, weren't we? Of our dreams, our plans, until everyone else got protective of us." She set her coffee on the fence post. "I've been thinking about what Mom wrote in her diary, about wanting to protect me from a hard life, the life of a farmer's wife. The irony is I would have loved it." She gestured to the surrounding fields. "All of this, the work, the challenges, even the uncertainty, because it would have been with you." Henry turned to look at her fully. In the morning light, he could see traces of the girl she'd been, but it was the woman she'd become that caught his breath. Strong, resilient, shaped by life's joys and sorrows into someone even more beautiful than his memories. "We can't go back," he said gently. "No," she agreed, "but maybe that's not what this is. Maybe it's about going forward, just together this time." A meadowlark called from somewhere in the wheat field, its morning song clear and hopeful. Henry set his coffee down next to hers. "Margaret," he took her hand, weathered now but still familiar. "Yesterday, when you talked about staying in Millbrook, I meant it." She squeezed his fingers. "The Williams place needs work, but it's home, more than Chicago ever was. And James, the grandkids? We'll visit, often according to James. He says the kids need to learn about their rural heritage." Her eyes twinkled. "I think he just wants to make sure you're treating me right." "And, are you sure?" Henry's voice grew serious. "About wanting to try this? We're not those teenagers anymore." "No, we're better." Margaret stepped closer. "We know who we are now, what matters, what's worth fighting for." The morning sun had risen higher, burning off the dew. In the distance they could hear the town waking up, trucks heading to work, the school bus making its rounds. "I loved Alice," Henry said suddenly, "with my whole heart. I need you to know that." "I know." Margaret's voice was soft. "Just like I loved Robert. They were good loves, true loves, but different." "Yes." She looked at their joined hands. "Different doesn't mean less, just different." Henry nodded, understanding. They weren't replacing their past loves. They were honoring them by being honest about this new chance. "The Rose Garden," he said after a moment. "Alice started it the year Lisa was born. Said every farm needs something just for beauty. I'd like to see it. It's overgrown now. I tried to maintain it, but then we'll restore it together." Margaret picked up her coffee. "Show me." They walked through the morning warm fields, talking about roses and memories and possibilities. When they reached the garden, wild and tangled but still blooming in places, Margaret's eyes lit up. "Oh, Henry, it's beautiful." "It's a mess," he corrected. "It's potential." She was already examining the old trellises. "These are solid. And, look, the heritage roses Alice planted are still fighting through. They just need some care, some pruning, some love." She turned to him, smiling. "That too." Without thinking about it, Henry leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle, brief. Not the passionate kiss of teenagers, but something deeper. A kiss that understood loss and grace, time and healing. When they parted, Margaret touched his cheek. That was different, perfect. From the farmhouse porch, Lisa watched them standing among the overgrown roses. She took a picture with her phone and sent it to James with a simple message. "I think they're going to be okay." His reply came quickly. "Better than okay. They're writing their own story this time." Henry stood in his bedroom, frowning at his reflection. He'd changed shirts 3 times already, feeling foolish each time. At 68, he shouldn't be nervous about a dinner date. Yet here he was, adjusting his collar like a teenager. The seeds for next season's planting sat on his dresser, winter wheat varieties he'd selected carefully, including a new hybrid strain. He'd planned to study them tonight, but Margaret had called earlier. "Let me cook for you," she'd said. "At Mom's house, no children, no diaries, no past, just dinner." Now he found himself holding a bottle of wine and a small packet of those same seeds, feeling oddly vulnerable. These weren't teenage butterflies. This was something deeper, more considered. The Williams house looked different already. Margaret had spent the week clearing away Eleanor's heavy drapes, letting light flood the rooms. Through the window, he could see her moving in the kitchen, comfortable and confident. She answered his knock, wearing an apron over a simple blue dress. "You're right on time. Brought wine." He held up the bottle. "And something else." She led him to the kitchen, where wonderful smells emanated from the oven. "Oh?" Henry placed the seed packet on the counter. "Next season's winter wheat. Thought you might want to learn about modern farming techniques, if you're staying." Margaret touched the packet gently. "Teaching me about farming? You must be serious." "I am." He watched her face carefully. "About all of it." She turned to check something in the oven, but not before he caught her smile. "Dinner first, then you can tell me all about hybrid wheat strains." The kitchen had been transformed. Eleanor's fussy decorations were gone, replaced by clean simplicity. Only the old copper pots remained, gleaming on their hooks. "Robert liked to cook," Margaret said, noting Henry's glance at the pots. "Taught me everything I know about proper seasoning. He'd approve of me using his techniques to cook for you. Alice would approve of me bringing her favorite wine." Henry set 2 glasses on the counter. "She always said good memories deserve to be shared." They moved around the kitchen together, setting the table, finishing dinner preparations. It felt natural, as if they'd been doing this for years instead of days. "Tell me about the farm," Margaret said as they sat down. "Not the past, the future. What are your plans?" Henry's eyes lit up. He explained about sustainable practices, new irrigation methods, the possibility of adding solar panels to more buildings. Margaret asked intelligent questions, took genuine interest. "You really did keep up with farming," he said, impressed. "I subscribed to agricultural journals, told Robert it was for investment research." She laughed softly. "He knew better but never said anything. Just renewed my subscriptions every Christmas. He sounds like a good man." He was. Just like Alice sounds like a wonderful woman. Margaret reached across the table. "We're allowed to honor them while building something new, you know." Henry took her hand. "I know. It's just complicated, different." He squeezed her fingers. "But good different." After dinner, they walked through the house. Margaret pointed out changes she wanted to make, asked his opinion about repairs. The porch definitely needed work. The boards creaked ominously under their feet. "I could help," Henry offered. "I'm pretty good with a hammer." "Pretty good? Lisa told me you built their entire back deck yourself." "She talks too much. She loves you." Margaret leaned against the porch railing. "They both do, Lisa and James. Did you see them exchanging phone numbers before he left? Plotting against us, probably, or planning our future." She looked out over the darkening yard. "James asked if I was sure about staying here, said Chicago would miss me." Henry's heart skipped. "And I told him Chicago would survive, but I might not, if I let this chance slip away again." The evening had grown cool. Henry shrugged off his jacket, draping it over her shoulders in a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and right. "I should show you the farm records," he said, "if you're interested in learning the business side." "Henry Mitchell, are you asking me to look at your books on our first proper date?" "Second," he corrected. "Coffee at Mason's was our first." "That wasn't a date, that was—" She waved her hand. "Reconnaissance." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the quiet yard. From somewhere nearby, Mrs. Henderson's porch light clicked on. the town's self-appointed romance monitor still on duty. "We're being watched," Margaret whispered. "Let them watch." Henry tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm done hiding how I feel about you." When he kissed her this time, it was slower, surer. No hesitation, no ghosts between them. Just two people who had lived enough to know exactly what they wanted. Mrs. Henderson's screen door squeaked. They broke apart, grinning like teenagers caught behind the bleachers. "Come to the farm tomorrow," Henry said. "I'll teach you about modern soil analysis. How romantic. Hey, I'm trying here. Farming is what I know." Margaret touched his cheek gently. "It's perfect. You're perfect." Later, driving home under a star-filled sky, Henry found himself planning tomorrow's lesson. He'd show her how to test soil samples, explain crop rotation strategies. Basic stuff, but important if she was going to be part of the farm's future. If the word held so much possibility, so much hope. At 68, he was learning that love could be both familiar and brand new, both comfortable and exciting. The seeds on his dresser seemed to approve when he finally got home. Next season's crop. Next season's possibilities. For the first time in years, he couldn't wait for spring. "Are you sure about this?" Henry asked, watching Margaret arrange flowers on his dining room table. The old oak surface had been extended to its full length, ready to accommodate their growing family. "Too late to back out now," she replied. "James and Emily are already on their way from Chicago with the kids, and Lisa's bringing the whole crew." The prospect of their first joint family dinner had seemed like a good idea when they planned it 2 weeks ago. Now, with both their children, bringing spouses and kids, Henry felt the weight of what they were attempting. What if the grandchildren don't get along? Margaret straightened a napkin. "They're kids, Henry. They'll either be best friends or mortal enemies within 10 minutes. Either way, they'll work it out." The sound of cars crunching on gravel announced the first arrivals. Lisa's voice carried through the screen door, instructing her children to wipe their feet. "Grandpa!" Tommy, age 8, burst through the door first, followed by his sisters Emma and Grace, 6 and 4 respectively. They stopped short at the sight of Margaret. "Children," Lisa appeared behind them. "You remember Miss Williams, the lady from the Rose Garden," Emma said solemnly. "Grandpa's friend." Margaret knelt to their level. "That's right, and today you're going to meet my grandchildren. Would you like that?" Before they could answer, more car doors slammed outside. James's voice mixed with his wife Emily's, both trying to corral their own children, Michael, 7, and Sarah, 5. The next few minutes were chaos as children sized each other up. Adults exchanged awkward greetings and coats were collected. Henry watched Margaret navigate it all with grace, remembering how easily she'd managed the high school drama club decades ago. "Dad," Lisa touched his arm. "Should we set up the kids' table on the porch? It's warm enough." "Good idea." He turned to James. "If that works for you." James, looking slightly overwhelmed, nodded. Anything to contain the energy. The adults settled around the dining room table, while happy shrieks drifted in from the porch. Margaret's pot roast, made from Alice's recipe, filled plates as conversation slowly warmed. "So," Emily ventured, "how did you two reconnect?" "Mom was trespassing," James said dryly. "Dad was brooding in his wheat field," Lisa countered. "Actually," Margaret smiled, "we were both exactly where we needed to be." Henry reached for her hand under the table. "Sometimes life gives you a second chance. You just have to be ready to recognize it." Speaking of recognition, Lisa's husband, Dan, spoke up. "Tommy asked me something interesting yesterday. He wanted to know if Miss Williams was going to be his grandmother too." The table fell silent. Margaret's hand tightened in Henry's. "What did you tell him?" Henry asked quietly. "I told him that families come in all shapes and sizes," Dan replied, "and that having more people to love is never a bad thing." From the porch came a sudden wail. Sarah, James's youngest, appeared in the doorway with tears streaming down her face. "Tommy says I can't be a farmer because I'm a city kid." Before anyone could react, Emma stood up for her new friend. "That's not true. Grandpa says anyone can farm if they love the land. Right, Grandpa?" Henry looked at his granddaughter with pride. "That's exactly right, sweetheart." "Tell you what," Margaret addressed Sarah. "Tomorrow morning your new friend Emma can help you collect eggs from the chicken coop. Would you like that?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Real chickens." "Real chickens," Henry confirmed. "And after that, maybe all of you would like to help plant some flowers in the rose garden?" The children's excitement brought them together again. Crisis forgotten. They rushed back to the porch, already planning their farming adventures. "You're good with them," James told Henry softly. "So is your mother," Lisa added. "The kids already adore her." Margaret returned from checking on the children. "They're comparing chicken facts now. Crisis averted. Remember when that was us?" Lisa asked James, sizing each other up over coffee. "Seems like a lifetime ago." He smiled at his sister. The word felt natural now. "Hard to believe we were worried about them dating." "Oh, we're still worried," Emily teased. "Just about different things, like whether they're getting enough rest with all these garden renovation projects. Or if they're being careful on that rickety porch they insist on fixing themselves," Dan added. "Our children have become our parents," Henry observed dryly. "Karma," Margaret declared. "Pure karma." The laughter that followed felt real, familial. As Henry looked around his table, at Lisa sharing photos with Emily, James and Dan discussing local real estate, the sounds of their grandchildren playing together, he realized they weren't just blending families. They were creating something entirely new. Margaret squeezed his hand again, and he knew she felt it too. This wasn't about recapturing what they'd lost in 1973. This was about building something better, richer, deeper than their teenage selves could have imagined. "More pot roast?" Margaret offered, lifting the serving dish. "Alice's recipe?" Lisa asked. "With one small addition," Margaret admitted. "A seasoning Robert taught me." The simple statement, the easy blending of their past and present, said everything about how far they'd come. From the porch came the sound of children's laughter, the future making itself heard. The storm warnings came early that morning. Henry watched the weather radar with growing concern, remembering similar patterns from storms that had threatened crops in years past. Margaret found him in the barn, securing equipment. Lisa called, she said, helping him move tools to higher ground. "Says we should come to town before it hits." "Can't." Henry checked the reinforcements on the barn doors. "Need to secure the farm." "Then I'm staying to help." He turned to argue, but saw the determination in her face. The same look she'd worn in high school when she'd insisted on helping his family bring in harvest before the first frost. "Margaret, this isn't safe. Neither is you being out here. Alone." She was already moving hay bales against the door. "Where do you keep the emergency supplies?" Thunder rolled in the distance as Henry led her to the storm cellar, a concrete bunker his father had built after the tornado of '69. Inside, lanterns and supplies lined the shelves, ready for exactly this situation. "Your father thought of everything," Margaret observed, checking the battery-powered radio. "He learned the hard way. Lost half the crop in '69. The wind picked up outside, wheat stalks bending almost horizontal. Henry's phone buzzed with a severe storm warning. Last chance to get to town, he said. Margaret's response was to hand him a flashlight and start inventorying supplies. "How many batteries do we need?" They worked together as the storm approached, securing what they could, preparing for what they couldn't. When the first pieces of debris started flying, Henry finally insisted they take shelter. The storm cellar was solid but small. They sat on old chairs, listening to the radio's warnings and the winds howling. Each crash from above made them wince. "The wheat," Henry started, "will either survive or it won't." Margaret took his hand. "That's farming. That's life," he corrected, squeezing her fingers. The radio crackled with updates about tornado sightings nearby. In the dim light of the lantern, Margaret's face showed concern, but not fear. "Tell me about the tornado of '69, she said, clearly trying to distract him from worrying. "You know about that. You were here. I know what everyone in town knew. I want to hear your version." Henry leaned back, letting memory take over. Dad was different after that storm. started planning more, taking fewer risks. Said nature would always remind you who's really in charge. Is that why you stayed after I left? The question had lingered between them, unasked until now. Partly. He looked at their joined hands. The farm needed me. But also, it was something I could control, you know. Couldn't control you leaving, couldn't control Mom and Dad's interference. But I could control this land, make it produce, keep it safe. And now I'm learning that control is overrated. He smiled slightly. Sometimes the best things happen when you let go. A particularly loud crash made them both jump. The radio warned of quarter-sized hail. Alice used to hate storms, Henry said softly. Would bake through them. Said if the power went out, at least we'd have fresh bread. Robert would tell stories, Margaret offered. Said if his voice was steady, the kids wouldn't be scared. It worked too. James still tells stories to his children during storms. The easy way they could share these memories now, without pain or jealousy, felt like its own kind of miracle. I should have looked for you, Henry said suddenly. After Dad died, when I found out about the scholarship they'd hidden, I should have tried to find you. I should have questioned Mom more, demanded answers. Margaret's voice held old regret. But Henry, maybe we needed those years. Needed to become who we are. Still, 45 years led us here. She gestured to the cellar, the storm, their intertwined hands. To this moment, these people we've become. Would you trade that? Before he could answer, the radio announced that the worst of the storm had passed. They waited another 30 minutes to be safe, then emerged to assess the damage. The farm had weathered it well. Some fence damage, a few downed trees, but the crops stood tall, resilient. Like them. Could have been worse, Henry said, surveying his land. Much worse. Margaret pointed to the old oak tree where they'd carved their initials. It stood unharmed, protecting their teenage declarations. Their phones buzzed simultaneously. Lisa and James checking on them. Margaret took a photo of them, disheveled but smiling, and sent it to both children with the caption, "Storm Cellar Date Night." James replied immediately, "Only you two would find romance in a bunker." Lisa's response followed. "Dad looks happier than he did during the last 3 storms combined." Standing in the aftermath, Margaret brushed debris from Henry's shirt. "You know what this means, don't you? That we're too old to be playing storm chasers. That we can handle anything, together." He pulled her close, both of them dirt-smudged and wrinkled. "Together," he agreed. "I like the sound of that." The church bulletin sat on Margaret's kitchen counter, innocent-looking, except for the announcement that made her coffee go cold. "Join us in celebrating the engagement of Henry Mitchell and Margaret Williams next Sunday after service. Sarah." "It printed it early," Henry explained, watching her reaction. "Says if we don't make it official, Mrs. Henderson will expire from curiosity." "We're not engaged," Margaret pointed out. "Not yet." Henry's eyes twinkled. "But Sarah's usually right about these things." The town had been watching their relationship unfold like a favorite TV show. Every lunch at Mason's Diner, every joint appearance at the grocery store, every shared moment in the rose garden had been duly noted and discussed. But something had shifted after the storm. Perhaps it was the photo their children had shared, showing them weathered but happy. Perhaps it was the way they'd worked together to help neighbors with storm damage. Whatever the reason, gossip had turned to genuine support. "Remember Betty Collins?" Margaret asked, picking up the bulletin. "She stopped me at the market yesterday. Alice's best friend, the one who wouldn't look at you when you first came back. She hugged me. Said Alice would be happy it was me." Margaret's voice caught. "Said Alice used to tell her that if anything happened to her, she hoped you'd find love again." Henry sat heavily at the kitchen table. "She never told me that. She told Betty instead. And now Betty's organizing the church reception we're apparently having next Sunday." The screen door creaked open as Lisa let herself in, carrying a box of old photos. "Found these at the house," she announced. "Thought you might want them for the memory board." "What memory board?" Margaret asked. "The one Mum's church group is making. To show your whole story." Lisa spread photos across the table. "Look, Here's one from your senior year, and here's Dad at the farm that summer, and here's one of each of your weddings and your kids growing up." "Lisa," Henry's voice held warning. "What? The whole town knows your story now. They want to celebrate it." "There's no story yet," Margaret protested. "We're just what?" Lisa challenged. "Dating, living in the same town, renovating houses together, planning next season's crops. Face it, you're writing the ending everyone hoped for 45 years ago." More photos spilled from the box, recent ones showing them in the rose garden, at family dinner, laughing with grandchildren. Their story, old and new, spread across Margaret's kitchen table. "Martha Reynolds wants to interview you for the town paper," Lisa continued. "Says it's the best love story Millbrook's had since you two the first time." Henry reached for Margaret's hand. "We don't have to do any of this." "Yes, you do," Lisa insisted, "because it's not just your story anymore. It's about second chances, about love being patient, about," she gestured to the photos, "about how sometimes the long way around is the right way after all." The door creaked again as Sarah from the diner arrived with pie and determination. "Good, you've seen the bulletin. Now about the reception." "Sarah?" Margaret tried to interrupt. "Mom's making Eleanor's raspberry pie, of course, and we thought for the memory board." "Sarah," Henry attempted, "and Mrs. Henderson insists on playing the organ, but we thought maybe the Collins twins could sing instead." "We're not engaged," Margaret finally managed. Sarah and Lisa exchanged looks. "Yet," Sarah said firmly, "but you will be. Everyone can see it. And when you are, we'll be ready." She started arranging photos, telling the story she saw. Young love interrupted, lives lived well, fate's unexpected reunion. The images flowed together. Henry's farm growing, Margaret's career in Chicago, their children's milestones, their separate joys and sorrows, all leading back to a wheat field at sunset. "You know what this reminds me of?" Lisa picked up a photo of teenage Henry and Margaret. That Shakespeare quote from high school, "The course of true love never did run smooth." "But it runs true," Sarah added. Eventually, Henry looked at Margaret, seeing in her eyes the same mix of amusement and emotion he felt. The town's enthusiasm should have felt intrusive, but somehow it didn't. Perhaps because this time everyone was on their side. "So," Sarah said briskly, "about that reception." Margaret squeezed Henry's hand. "Maybe we should let them plan it. Maybe we should give them something to plan for," he replied softly. The meaning behind his words made her breath catch. Their audience pretended sudden fascination with photo arrangements. "Is that a proposal?" Margaret whispered. "Not yet." Henry smiled, but Sarah's usually right about these things. Outside, a car slowed as it passed. Probably Mrs. Henderson doing her daily reconnaissance. But this time, Margaret found herself waving, welcoming the town's investment in their happiness. They had been Millbrook's cautionary tale once, whispered about and pitied. Now they were its story of hope, proof that time could heal instead of just pass. The house key felt heavy in Margaret's hand as she stood in Henry's kitchen. Her mother's house, now her house, had sold that morning, far more quickly than expected. The young couple buying it was eager to start renovations. "You could stay here," Henry said quietly, watching her turn the key over and over. "Not just temporarily, permanently." They'd been dancing around this conversation for weeks, ever since the house sold. Living arrangements at their age shouldn't be complicated, but they were finding that 6 decades of independence didn't yield easily to change. "The farm needs someone full-time," he continued. "The rose garden's thriving with your care, and the grandchildren love having both of us here when they visit." "Henry," Margaret set the key on the counter, "are you asking me to move in?" "I'm asking you to consider it. The house is plenty big. We could convert the east wing into your space, for when we need privacy or when we drive each other crazy." Her smile took the sting from the words. "That too." He pulled out a set of blueprints he'd clearly been keeping ready. "Look, we could add a sunroom here, perfect for your reading, and this could be your art studio." Margaret studied the plans, touched by the thought he'd put into this. Every detail considered her needs, her interests. But something held her back. What about Alice's things? Henry's hands stilled on the blueprints. What about them? Henry, this was your home with her. Her paintings are still on the walls. Her garden tools are still in the shed. Her cookbooks could share a shelf with Robert's copper pots, he finished. Margaret, I'm not asking you to replace Alice. I'm asking you to help make this place ours. And my independence, the life I've built, stays intact, just closer, he smiled slightly. Unless you prefer a long-distance relationship with the wheat field? Before she could respond, his phone rang, Lisa calling about Sunday dinner plans. As he talked, Margaret wandered into the living room, looking at it with new eyes. Alice's influence was everywhere, but so were newer touches. Margaret's quilted throw on the couch, her favourite books mixing with Henry's on the shelves, her grandmother's clock on the mantel. When had she started leaving pieces of herself here? Henry appeared in the doorway. Lisa sends her love and her vote for you moving in. She said that. Says it's time we stop pretending we don't want to be together all the time. Margaret sank onto the couch, overwhelmed. It's a big step. Bigger than reconnecting after 45 years, bigger than blending our families, bigger than taking on the farm together. Different. She touched Alice's favorite reading chair. This house holds so many memories. Yes, Henry sat beside her, and it has room for more. As if on cue, his tablet chimed with a video call from James. They answered together, already used to sharing these moments. Mom! James looked excited. Did you tell him? Tell me what? Margaret shot her son a warning look. I was waiting for the right time. Tell me what? Henry repeated. James grinned. Mom's been taking online courses in agricultural business management. She's halfway to certification. Henry turned to her, surprised. You have? I wanted to understand the farm better, she admitted. To be more help, more involved. I was going to tell you when I finished. When were you planning to tell me you'd already decided to stay? Margaret blushed. Was I that obvious? Only to everyone but yourself. James laughed through the screen. Look, I have to go, but Mom, the house in Chicago sold too. Just saying. After he hung up, silence filled the room. Margaret's house key gleamed on the kitchen counter, catching the afternoon light. I kept thinking, she said finally, about what we'd lost all those years apart. But that's not what this is about, is it? No, Henry took her hand. It's about what we're building. Together. Together. He squeezed her fingers. Although, I draw the line at you rearranging my tractor maintenance schedule, even if I'm certified in agricultural management. Especially then. Their laughter filled the room, making it feel more like home than any renovation could. Margaret looked around again, seeing not just Alice's memories or Henry's life, but possibility. Room for new photos alongside the old ones. Space for Robert's copper pots and her mother's china. A place where their grandchildren could grow up, knowing the fullness of love's capacity to expand. Yes, she said suddenly. Yes. Yes to moving in. Yes to the sunroom. Yes to... She waved at the blueprints. All of it. Henry's smile was brighter than the afternoon sun. Even the tractor maintenance schedule? Don't push your luck, farmer. He pulled her close, and for a moment they just held each other in the room that had seen so much life, so much love, and was about to see more. Welcome home, he whispered. The house key on the counter caught the light again, no longer heavy with indecision, but bright with promise. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for an outdoor ceremony. Henry stood at the edge of his wheat field, where chairs had been arranged in a semicircle around an arch woven with roses from Alice's garden. He touched the simple gold band in his pocket, different from the one he'd dreamed of giving Margaret 45 years ago, but somehow more meaningful. Lisa appeared at his side, straightening his tie. You look handsome, Dad. Your mother would have laughed, he said softly. Me in a suit among the wheat. She would have loved it. Lisa adjusted a rose on his lapel. She would have loved all of this. In the farmhouse, Margaret sat at Alice's old vanity while Emily helped with her hair. The mirror reflected both of them, along with a photo of Alice that Margaret had insisted on keeping in its place. Something borrowed. Margaret touched the pearl necklace Lisa had lent her. Something blue. She smiled at the forget-me-nots in her bouquet. Something old. Her fingers brushed the locket containing photos of Robert and Alice. And something new. Emily fastened the bracelet James had given her that morning. Perfect. Through the window, they could see the guests arriving. Not the whole town, though many had offered to come. Just family and closest friends, gathering in the place where their story had begun and begun again. Sarah from the diner was setting up the reception table, Eleanor's raspberry pie in pride of place, among other hometown favorites. Betty Collins arranged flowers, pausing occasionally to dab her eyes. Even Mrs. Henderson had been invited her, weekly surveillance of their romance having evolved into genuine affection. "Mom." James appeared in the doorway, catching his breath at the sight of her. "It's time." The ceremony was simple, honest, perfect. Their grandchildren preceded them down the aisle, scattering rose petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Henry waited beneath the arch, his face lighting up as Margaret approached on James's arm. Their vows were brief but profound, written together over late-night coffee and early morning sunrises. "Margaret," Henry's voice carried across the quiet field. 45 years ago, I thought I knew what love was. I was right about the feeling, but wrong about the timing. Life gave us different paths, blessed us with different loves, shaped us into the people we are today. Now, standing here with you, I understand that true love isn't just about the heart. It's about timing, wisdom, and the courage to begin again. Margaret squeezed his hands, her own voice steady. "Henry, we've lived full lives, loved deeply, lost profoundly, and found our way back to each other. I promise to honor all that made us who we are. Our past loves, our children, our separate journeys. And I promise to face whatever comes next together, knowing that love doesn't divide when shared. It multiplies." The simple gold bands they exchanged caught the sunlight as they slipped them on each other's fingers. No elaborate proposals had been necessary, just a quiet decision one evening over blueprints and farm accounts that it was time to make official what their hearts already knew. "By the power vested in me," the minister smiled, "and with the blessing of all gathered here, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss was gentle, mature, full of understanding about life's complexities and joys. Their grandchildren cheered, not quite understanding the history they were witnessing, but feeling its importance nonetheless. The reception was exactly what they wanted. Family-style dinner at long tables set up between the house and the wheat field. Stories flowed as freely as the wine, tales of both their past and present interweaving naturally. "Remember when" became a chorus, each memory adding to their shared history rather than dividing it. As the sun began to set, Henry led Margaret to the edge of the wheat field. Their wedding bands gleamed in the golden light. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Complete," she corrected, "which is better than just happy." Behind them, their grandchildren played tag between the tables while their children shared stories and laughter. The wheat field whispered its approval, the same wind that had witnessed their first love, now blessing their last. "Look," Margaret pointed to where Tommy was showing Michael how to identify different wheat varieties, just as Henry had taught him. "The farm's future," Henry smiled. "Our future," she leaned against him. "All of it." They stood together, watching. Their families, once separate, now beautifully entwined, create new memories in the field that had started it all. Above them, the first stars appeared, witnesses to a love story that had taken the scenic route but arrived exactly where it was meant to be. Their shared calendar hung in the kitchen, pages filled with the comfortable chaos of their merged lives. Doctor's appointments mingled with grandchildren's visits, farm maintenance schedules overlapped with book club meetings. Margaret added a star to today's date, their first anniversary. 1 year, Henry mused, studying the calendar over his morning coffee. Feels like forever and no time at all. The year had brought its challenges. Henry's knee surgery in March had tested their patience, his as an unwilling patient, hers as a determined caregiver. Margaret's mild heart scare in August had reminded them both that time was precious, but between the hard moments had bloomed countless joys. James called, Margaret said, joining him at the table. Sarah's made the soccer team. They're coming next weekend to celebrate. Lisa's bunch too? Henry reached for the calendar to check. Of course. Tommy wants to show Michael how much the calves have grown. Their grandchildren had adapted to the farm's rhythms as naturally as Margaret had, treating both house and land as if they'd always belonged to both families. The sunroom they'd added had become homework central during visits, while the restored rose garden hosted tea parties for the younger ones. Remember last Christmas? Henry smiled at the memory. All of them sleeping, wherever they could fit. The great holiday sleepover, Margaret laughed. Robert would have loved seeing James's kids so comfortable on a farm. He always worried they were too urban. Alice would have adored how Lisa's girls have taken to gardening. Henry's voice held warmth rather than sadness. They'd learned to share memories of their late spouses naturally, their past loves woven seamlessly into their present happiness. The morning sun streamed through windows Margaret had insisted on enlarging, making the kitchen brighter than it had been in years. Henry watched her move around the familiar space, noting how she'd made it her own while keeping touches of Alice alive. The hand-painted tiles above the sink, the collection of rooster figurines, the recipe box that now held both families. Treasured cards. Your appointment's at 2, she reminded him, tapping the calendar. Dr. Roberts wants to check that knee again. It's fine. It's making that clicking sound when you climb the porch steps. She gave him the look that meant no arguments. I'm driving. He'd learned to choose his battles. Yes, dear. Their shared laughter was interrupted by a video call from Chicago. Emily with breaking news. We're having another baby, she announced, as soon as they answered. James is calling Lisa now. We wanted you both to know first. Margaret's joy lit up her face. When? March. And we thought, well, we'd like to name her Margaret Alice, if that's okay. Henry reached for his wife's hand as tears spilled down her cheeks. It's more than okay, he said gruffly. It's perfect. After the call, they sat in comfortable silence, absorbing the news. Their family was growing, evolving, creating new branches on a tree they'd thought complete. Alice would have loved that, Margaret said softly, having a great-granddaughter share her name. So would Robert. Henry squeezed her hand. Speaking of names, did you see what Tommy's been calling us? Margaret smiled. Grandpa Henry and Grandma Maggie? Yes, Lisa asked if it bothered me. Does it? No. It feels right, like everything else this year. The calendar caught Henry's eye again, specifically the note about the farming seminar Margaret was teaching next month at the community college. Her agricultural business certification had led to unexpected opportunities, including mentoring young farmers. You've changed this place, he said thoughtfully. Not just the house or the garden. The whole farm feels more alive. We've changed. It, she corrected. Together. A notification popped up on both their phones, Lisa sharing photos from last weekend's visit. The images showed their grandchildren scattered across the farm, Tommy explaining wheat varieties to the younger ones, Emma and Sarah having a tea party in the rose garden, Michael helping Henry with the tractor maintenance he still insisted on doing himself. Look at that, Margaret zoomed in on one photo. They're all wearing those future farmer shirts James thought were so funny. City kids gone country, Henry chuckled. Who would have thought? The morning stretched ahead of them, filled with the comfortable routines they'd established. Margaret would check on her latest agricultural projects, while Henry supervised. The seasonal maintenance. They'd meet for lunch, perhaps drive into town for his appointment, stop by Mason's for pie and coffee. Simple things, ordinary moments. But after 45 years apart, every shared day felt like a gift. Happy anniversary, Margaret said, reaching for the coffee pot to refill their cups. Ready for another year? Henry watched her move through. Their kitchen, this woman who had been both his first and last love, who had helped him build something even better than their teenage dreams had imagined. Ready for all of them, he replied. 1 year and 3 months after their wedding, Henry and Margaret walked through the wheat field at sunset, just as they had the day she returned. The stalks swayed around them, golden in the fading light, but this time they walked hand in hand, wedding bands gleaming. "It looks different now," Margaret observed, touching a wheat head gently. "The new hybrid strain is taller. Better yield too," Henry added. "Though I suspect that has more to do with your soil management program than the strain itself." They reached the spot where they'd first seen each other again. Someone, probably Tommy, had placed a small marker there, decorated with their initials and the date. Their grandchildren had turned their reunion story into a family legend. "Do you ever wonder," Margaret asked, "what would have happened if I hadn't come back that day?" "Sometimes." Henry's grip tightened on her hand. "But I prefer to think about what has happened since." The farm had flourished under their joint care. Margaret's agricultural expertise had modernized their operations, while Henry's experience kept them grounded in tried-and-true methods. The blend of old and new mirrored their relationship perfectly. "James called earlier," Margaret said. "They've put an offer on the Peterson place." Henry stopped walking. "The house next door? Really? Says the kids need more space to run. And with the new baby coming," she smiled, "I think he's finally admitted that country life suits them." The Peterson house had stood empty for years, its owners long moved to Florida. The thought of having James and his family as neighbors, of their grandchildren growing up on the land, made Henry's heart full. "Lisa will be jealous," he said. "She's been trying to convince Dan to buy closer to the farm." "Oh, she won't be jealous." Margaret's eyes twinkled. "Not when she hears about the cottage." "What cottage?" "The one we're going to build on the north pasture. Perfect size for them to stay in during summer breaks and long weekends." Henry stared at his wife. "You've been plotting, planning," she corrected. "There's a difference." The sun dipped lower, painting the wheat gold and crimson. They walked on, passing the old oak tree with their carved initials, now joined by similar carvings from their grandchildren. "Remember when we thought we had it all figured out?" Henry mused. "Back in high school. We did, in a way." Margaret stopped to face him. "We knew we loved each other. We knew this land was special. We just didn't know how long the journey would be." A meadowlark called from somewhere in the field, its evening song familiar and sweet. Henry pulled Margaret close, dancing slowly to music only they could hear. "Worth the wait?" he asked. "Worth everything." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Though I do wish—" "What?" "I wish Alice and Robert could see this, see how their love helped shape ours, see how their children have become family to each other." "They see." Henry's voice was soft. "Every time James's kids play in Alice's rose garden, every time Lisa uses Robert's copper pots to cook Sunday dinner, they're part of this story too." They stood together as the sun set, casting long shadows across the wheat field that had witnessed so much of their story. Behind them, the farmhouse lights glowed warmly, and from the distance came the sound of cars approaching, their children arriving for their weekly family dinner. "We should head back," Margaret said. "Sarah's bringing that new boy she's been seeing. Says he's special. Poor kid, facing the whole family at once. He'll survive. We did." Their laughter carried across the field as they turned toward home. The wheat whispered around them, telling their story to the evening wind, a story of love lost and found, of time's slow healing, of happiness that came not in spite of the wait, but because of it. "Next season," Henry said as they walked, "we should plant sunflowers along the border, brighten things up a bit. Always thinking ahead, aren't you?" "Have to." He squeezed her hand. "We've got a lot of seasons left to plan for." The future stretched before them like the wheat field. At harvest, rich with possibility, full of life, ready to yield its bounty to those patient enough to tend it.